Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting for June. The fire alarm procedures are as follows. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer and assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls while this meeting is in progress. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting this evening? That's a no. And no request to speak under 20.1. I've had one request for public speaking, that's from Mr. Simon Bell, and there's no other members of the public. For any items that require the panel to approve a vote, I shall ask officers to activate the electronic voting, and therefore I will announce after that the outcome. Okay, moving on to the agenda items. Item 1, the apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Pope and that's substituted by Councillor Harry Scobie. Any other apologies? We have a few missing. No other apologies. Okay, item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of May 2026. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting on the 19th of May, our copies are sent to the agenda pack. And can I have a proposal? We've all read them, I presume. Councillor Curry proposing and second to Councillor Bright. Thank you. Just a couple of things I want to pick up from that. So we did make some recommendations at the last meeting. A couple on Spitfire Way depot, and I think Councillor Green said that wanted to make sure, was it the lease? Yeah, about the 5-year break clause. That's in there apparently. And the Cabinet did read the agenda, so they took those recommendations on board. And also Penny Button's clean air strategy as well. We made a couple of recommendations there about the port, further monitoring of air down there, and the findings made public. And I think we all received an email yesterday from Mike outlining the procedure with that. So yeah, all our recommendations were taken on board. Okay, so if we all agree on the minutes, we're all going to vote. And Charles is ready. And now. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Have we got, is there 9? There should be 10, shouldn't there? It's only 9. Somebody didn't vote? Oh, there is only 9. That's fine. Done. Okay, excellent. So, yeah. It's where you're sitting staggered. It just threw me a little bit. Okay, moving on to item 4, the review of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel work programme for 26-27. Does any members have any questions or comments on the work programme? Councillor Bright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In view of the waste collection motion being presented to Council on Thursday, I ask that the Overview and Scrutiny Panel saves time by immediately addressing the requests in the motion as part of our work programme. A presentation about waste collection and the simpler recycling scheme has already been scheduled for our July meeting, so please can we use this opportunity to move the motion today to give officers the time to compile a presentation and a report which responds to the requests in the motion. And for anyone that hasn't seen the motion, I have got the 3 requests. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bright. Yeah, so there is an extraordinary meeting proposed in that motion on Thursday. Whether that's voted on and carried forward, then that's for that meeting too. But like you say, Councillor Albany's coming to the July meeting. I know he's on holiday at the moment, I think, isn't he? And it's whether the calendar can take an extra meeting for an extraordinary meeting, or we just take those recommendations from full council to July. But it is a very big packed agenda in July already, if you have a look at the work programme there. So,
sorry, no, what I'm asking is that we've got an opportunity now to pass that motion. So rather than it go to full council, because it's the motion's actually asking Overview and Scrutiny Panel, I probably need your advice, Ingrid, but they're asking the Overview and Scrutiny Panel to Exactly, and then to request a report. That's something we can do right here, right now, to save time.
I'll just ask you, so is it a full council decision or is it over your scrutiny panel decision to have that extraordinary meeting?
Well, it would be...
So what I will ask then, as the panel members are here, if everybody's happy, if there is an extraordinary meeting, that we all attend an extraordinary meeting. I think is that fair to ask you now? But then, as I say, calendars look quite busy. So and whether we wait for that a month and bring it forward at the July meeting, or whether we have an extraordinary meeting, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that there are 3 requests in the motion. So one's to convene the extraordinary meeting. The second is to request a detailed report, which I imagine a report will be coming for the July meeting. Anyway, it's almost like we've got all the points here. It's almost like, why don't we give this to the officers so the report basically answers the questions that the motion's going to be talking about on Thursday anyway. We've got an opportunity to do that now.
Yeah, I'm happy to. If everybody, Councillor Green, let Councillor Green come in.
Yes.
I was just going to say, I think the public would like us to deal with it as soon as.
Yeah, so is that the feeling of everybody here? I'm getting a lot of nods. I don't think. Do we need an electronic vote on that, Charles, or can we just take a hit?
There's nothing to prevent the panel deciding that that's what they want to consider without prejudicing. It still has to be considered at the extraordinary meeting and it could be rejected. But in any event, you have the power to say that you want to consider that exactly.
Councillor Butcher.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we can be confident that the full council meeting would actually pass the thing. You know, we're all concerned about this, and just passing it tonight gives officers an extra 2 days to, sort the reports and things out.
Okay, so I mean, I'll take it. Shall I just do a chair's discretion, and we are going to call an extraordinary meeting? I think that's the best way to do it. Okay, everybody happy with that? Okay, so anything else on the work programme? No. Okay, moving on to item number 5. So members will know, as those who've been here a while, every year that we are the crime and disorder panel as well. So item number 5 is the annual community safety briefing, and I call on Joanna Taylor. Oh, is it you, Penny? I call on Penny Bunn.
You get me instead, I'm afraid. So the Crime and Disorder Act 1998 outlines the statutory requirements for responsible authorities to work together with local agencies, organisations and individuals with a combined goal to plan and implement strategies to address antisocial behaviour, crime and disorder and to create a safer community. These statutory partnerships are known as the Community Safety Partnerships, and the statutory partners are local authority, police, health, probation and fire and rescue service. Locally, we also work in partnership with other organisations such as voluntary sector and commissioned services. Specifically, our members include TDC, Kent Police, KCC, Kent Fire and Rescue, Kent Probation and Health. So the partnership is required to carry out an annual strategic assessment and to review its rolling annual community safety plan. This is to ensure that issues and concerns raised in the strategic assessment are reflected in the annual plan and operation response is proportionate and has the ability to reduce crime and disorder locally. The assessment provides a structured, evidence-led foundation for decision-making, enabling the partnership to identify high crime types, geographical hotspots and root causes of crime such as deprivation and drug markets. For the current 25-26 period, the strategic assessment has again identified 3 key priorities of safer people, safer places and reducing serious violence and harm. Chief Inspector Swallow, who is the chair of the Thanet Community Safety Partnership and our district commander for Kent Police, is going to run through the strategic assessment and the reviewed community safety plan with you. He will detail how the partnership aims to build stronger communities through education, engagement and enforcement, while increasing early intervention to prevent serious violence across the district. Thank you.
So we welcome Ian Swallow from Kent Police.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Firstly, an apology. If I sound a bit croaky, I've been battling off a bit of a chest infection for the last couple of weeks, and it's stubbornly refusing to go. So if I start tailing off, do excuse me. We'll keep taking sips of water as we go through. So thank you for inviting me along this evening. As Penny said, I'm chair of the Community Safety Partnership Executive Committee, and I chair that element of the partnership and part of the statutory partners that work together to form our Community Safety Plan, which is a 3-year plan, but is a rolling plan, and then the annual strategic assessment document, which I hope all of you had a chance to see. What I intend to do is go through it page by page. I will flick through fairly rapidly the various parts because it's quite a weighty document. But if there are elements that you want me to stop on, or if you've got any specific questions, please do feel free to ask me as we go, or equally I'm happy to take any questions at the end of delivering the strategic assessment. So, as was outlined, our 3 pillars of the CSP and what forms the executive summary of the strategic assessment are reducing serious violence, safer people and safer places. In essence, from a policey point of view, that's about reducing serious violent crime, our most harmful crime in terms of against the person. Safer people, which is specifically around vulnerability, both adult and child vulnerability, and safer places, which is geographic-based issues, and again, it sort of mainly specifically relates to antisocial behaviour and associated crimes that go with that type of behaviour. In a brief summary to start with, before I move into each of the 3 pillars, as you can see from the document, we have identified those 3 areas for a reason. They remain and always will remain, I would imagine, the 3 core areas for Thanet and the Community Safety Partnership, because they are the 3 areas that harm this district the most in terms of adult vulnerability, in terms of safeguarding, and in terms of threat, risk and harm to our communities. We've had a period of sustained reduction in those areas over the last couple of few years, probably since COVID. Those areas have dropped significantly. What we have started to see, last year we started to plateau out in most of those areas, and now what we're beginning to see is a rise in those key areas. There's lots and lots of different reasons for that. Significantly around adult vulnerability, where we are vulnerable population, as you can see from the demographics and statistics provided. We have a very, very high proportion of vulnerable people when you compare that to other districts in the county, and that is becoming even more so. Mental health is a huge enabling factor in an awful lot of our vulnerability. I think I've quoted before that in Kent, it was mapped previously that somewhere in the region of 2/3 of every call or everything that Kent Police deals with has a mental health element to it, whether it be a victim, whether it be a suspect, whether it be the overall enabler for that incident. So vulnerability runs through everything that we do, whether it be, as I say, the offender or the victim. So looking first at reducing our serious violence, serious violent crime in Thanet has increased over the last year. The areas that we're most specifically concerned about are knife crime, which has again seen an uptick in certain areas, and only in the last 2 or 3 days we've had 2 incidents within the last 2 or 3 days where the use of weapons within the Margate area has been a significant factor in serious crime. The context around this increase is that it's confined to a very specific portion of the population in terms of both offending and victimisation, and it's also confined to specific geographical areas within the district. So in terms of serious violent offending involving weapons, Margate Central remains the most vulnerable area for that type of behaviour. To a level that I've spoken previously at these evenings, where I've spoken about hotspots and grip zones. It's police analogy for areas of focus where we have most harm and most vulnerability. That is a national recognised phraseology, and it was set by the Home Office. The hotspot and grip zone policing is being wound back in terms of the phraseology, and we're moving to specific focus on crime types. And one of those crime types, as I said, is knife crime. So the Home Office has brought in a project around knife crime concentration zones. Margate has one of those zones, and it is the only zone within the Thanet district. We are given a certain amount of funding by the Home Office, and what we will do as part of the partnership is work together to uplift our patrolling of the affected area, but more importantly than that is work as a partnership to tackle the underlying problems that have caused that issue in the first place. So it is very much community safety partnership funding, and we'll work together as the key agencies to use that money and to focus our attention on that key area of harm. I know you will all appreciate, because you know your district, where that problems often come from. A lot of our calls relate to people who are in crisis, and unfortunately, the people who are in crisis come together, and that is where a lot of our violent crime comes from. So when I said about specific people and specific locations, thankfully the chances of being a victim of serious violent crime for most of the members of the community in Thanet is very low still, but the chances of being a victim of serious violent crime, if you are within that most harmed demographic, is increasing. So that is where we need to focus our attention going forward, on those areas. What is interesting and what isn't reflected within the plan is when you go onto the Kent crime data, which you can do, Kent Police published data, is that overall crime in Thanet outside of these areas is falling quite significantly. So other areas such as serious acquisitive crime, theft, theft of motor vehicle, theft from motor vehicle, shoplifting, burglary, all these areas around serious acquisitive crime is dropping in Thanet. What is going up is the crime that causes physical and personal harm, which is what we're talking about. So if you have it in front of you, on page 6 of the document, it refers to those areas of serious violent crime. So we recorded 1,369 offences in October 24 to September 25, which was the second highest in Kent and Medway. And as I said, and it's articulated there, that was after a previous fall over a number of years. Our drugs offences are going up, our domestic abuse offences are going up, but interestingly, our violence against women and girls is reducing. Now, that in a lot of ways would seem to contradict itself, that the fact that VORG is going down but DA is going up. Where the VORG is going down is VORG within the community in public. So we have made huge strides in reducing harm to women and girls in public places. So the nighttime economy, on our beaches, in our parks, in our streets, the vulnerability to women and girls has reduced quite significantly, and it is a safer place to be. Now that is after a sustained effort from the partnership to tackle exactly that. And we have been putting in place many, many operations, all sorts of incredible pieces of work, both through hardline policing, all the way through to engagement, education, and actually working with other agencies to tackle that exact problem. So that's a really good news story, and it's something that we've really focused on. What we have to be mindful of is everything else that now spins around that, and that's the vulnerability data, the DA data, that is on the rise. Domestic abuse tends to be behind closed doors, tends to be in private, which makes it difficult for us to tackle. What we are seeing is an increase in reporting from people who haven't previously reported it. Now, whilst that leads to an increase in crime, it is actually a positive from a partnership perspective, because what we have seen, and when we have CSP meetings, we're getting that feedback from our partner agencies who work within the DA environment. We're seeing confidence increasing from victims as well. So confidence from victims does inevitably lead to an increase in reporting. We're not ever going to just say, well, that's the answer, that's what's happening, it's just people are more confident. There clearly is a problem, but we have to be nuanced and we have to be intelligent with the data, and we have to recognise that there is an increase in confidence, and that isn't just us saying so, that's our partners saying so, that's our victims saying so. So the fact that victims are more willing to come forward and report incidents that have been going on for years and years and years is a real step in the right direction. But we have to recognise that we have an issue that we have to tackle head on around that. On to page 7, when it talks about some of the enablers, really, so the drivers that cause some of these issues. I have already mentioned deprivation and vulnerability. The county lines network and the drug supply network is and always will be an issue for Thanet. Things will have to change hugely, socio-economically, for that not to be a core driver for Thanet. That is not unique to us at Margate Ramsgate Broadstairs. That is something that happens a lot when you're in close proximity to a major city and when you're on the coast. A lot of looked after children historically are placed in coastal settings, and our county line drugs networks know this, and they will prey upon it, and they will use that enhanced vulnerability around children and adults with special needs or enhanced vulnerability. They will prey upon that. That creates the county line issue. Kent Police is exceptional at tackling OCG and drug supply. That is something that's been recognised within our Peel report around our major crime handling. We have been a leader for many, many years on intelligence-led policing, and that's where that comes into play. The breaking up of the OCG, the breaking up of county lines, and going after the individuals that are leading that, as opposed to going after the user or the first line dealer, who would also invariably be a user of drugs as well in many, many cases. And they're the individuals that we need to be trying to work with and give help to. So our strategy around tackling OCG and county lines will very, very much go after the big player, because then that will have the trickle-down effect. So it is a huge driver for deprivation and drug supply within the district. The other drivers written there, I've just touched upon the concentrated deprivation. Obviously, the makeup of Thanet is that that we are very, very close to each other. There are wards that have a very, very tight concentration of individuals, of very vulnerable people that can cause issues. There's a group that we sit on called the Thanet Health Alliance that sort of looks at where areas of key deprivation are, and we work with the partnership to try and work with those key areas of deprivation, because there are some startling statistics out there about if you live in a less dense ward or a more affluent ward within Thanet. So if you take Broadstairs, for example, the drop-off in deprivation is quite stark. So you only then have to move a mile or two, as you know, before suddenly you're in an incredibly deprived ward, and the crime rate goes up, the life expectancy goes down, the health need increases, etc., 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 which is why we focus our attention on those specific geographic locations. And I mentioned the knife crime concentration zone in Margate Central, but our key focus for long-term sustainable activity will remain Margate Central, Cliftonville West, Cliftonville West, and East Cliff and Harbour wards in Ramsgate. They're the three areas that we focus on specifically. That's not to get confused in the fact that in the summer months we have demand that takes us elsewhere, such as Broadstairs, because of the popularity of people coming down. But we're talking about over a 3-year plan, those areas being our tight focus. And lastly on that sheet, the nighttime economy. It's thriving, it's getting bigger, it's getting better. That's really, really encouraging, but with it brings problems, and it brings crime. Dreamland is a really, really responsible partner with us. They work with us really closely. There have been 2 incidents, which we know of in the last 2 years, that we've worked with them, and that's well documented. But as their popularity increases and the people to the town and the district goes up, so does the demand on Kent Police and our partners. So that cannot be overlooked, that since COVID we've had an uptick and an uptick and uptick of people visiting the district, and the weather seems to have improved year on year as well. That brings with it demand, that brings with it crime, and you can then see the crime figures begin to slowly rise, especially, unsurprisingly, alcohol-fuelled violent crime. So that's one of the things that we're aware of. The next page talks about reducing crime. We talk about the sexual offences. So again, this relates a lot to our nighttime economy, deprivation, and DA offences as well, because sexual offences are often heavily linked to DA offences. VORG, whilst it's a good news story in terms of what we're achieving, does remain a priority. You know, the report mentions 42% feeling unsafe at night. That's something that we're working very, very strongly on. And on the right-hand side of that gives an examples of some of the things that the partnership has done to improve that and try and reduce that fear of violence even further. So we move on to our Safer People. So I'm now on page 10. So again, this relates to DA. DA volume in Thanet is high. And it's increasing. Mental health, I mentioned. Rough sleeping is increasing, which creates a very complex problem for us to solve, because rough sleeping invariably goes with some substance and alcohol misuse as well. That creates offending, but we are very, very cognizant of the fact that whilst we need to tackle this from an enforcement point of view, and again we will go after that recidivist offender, we need to make sure that we're working with our partners to reduce the problem, as opposed to criminalising every individual who has these complex challenges. So that is something that we are really, really keen to do. And I think that's where the power of the partnership comes in, because if you're talking solely about policing, I would use the law and we would throw the law at an individual, whereas when you work with the partnership, we're able to be more nuanced, we're able to identify problems and problem solve that approach and go the best approach in order to deal with it. And then I looked after children that are being exploited and are subject to missing episodes, and adult and child safeguarding referrals remain the highest in Kent. And that data set alone demonstrates the vulnerability that we have in this island, and how we have to be very, very switched on with how we deal with it. The data there reflects that, so again I won't go through it, but you can see there's some positives around high-risk cases. Section 136 detentions on page 11, that's referring to mental health detentions by Kent Police under emergency powers. I've gone on record many times before, I think, saying that I don't like having to use emergency powers to detain someone under Section 136. Someone who is in crisis, the last thing that we want to do is take them into police custody, into detention. We can detain them up to 24 hours. We no longer detain people in cells. We don't do that at all. If they're having mental health episodes, we detain them at hospital. But it is vitally important that we work with our partners, the mental health teams, the NHS, to make sure that we deliver the right care to the right person by the right team, and that it's not Kent Police is the first face they see, because that often creates more vulnerability and it creates more crisis. Again, just going back over some of the things I said, so Safer People on page 12 talks about mental health pressures, hidden homelessness, rough sleeping. I've already spoken about that and about how mental health plays such a huge part in everything that we do. whether it be victims or suspects. And then moving on, lastly of the three pillars, the safer places. This is mainly talking about antisocial behaviour. Extremely well documented, I think, over the last 12 months, and most recently within the over the bank holiday weekend and during the half-term week, that ASB in Thanet can spike, and it can spike very quickly. It's kind of, again, a victim of its own success. People like coming here. We as a partnership really want to encourage that, and I've gone on various media channels when pushed to sort of say, do we want to keep the kids away? The answer is absolutely not. No, of course we don't. What we want is responsible people coming and behaving in a way that doesn't affect the community. And that, again, isn't easy to achieve. It's because Kent Police have powers. I can use those powers, I can put them in place, and we use that sledgehammer again to crack that nut by criminalising young people, by putting people before the courts that are already under strain. There are better ways of doing this. And that's using softer powers, dispersal powers, other enforcement powers that don't criminalise, but also education, engagement, and making people understand what they're doing. That includes, with Kent Police, for example, taking children home to their parents, making the parents responsible for their behaviour by using community protection warnings and notices for the parent as opposed to the child, and all sorts of other sort of lower level that doesn't get shown in the media, lower level engagement that try and break the problem. That also includes, we talk about the transport system there. The railway network is used to transport most of the problems that we have that comes in. We've worked very, very closely over the last year, and again, we've intensified that work with South Eastern Railway and British Transport Police over the last few weeks, following the early start of the issues this year, to work with them to try and stop the problem from occurring before it arrives. That is the answer. As soon as they're here and they're on the beaches, if they're causing issues, we have to deal with it, of course. That then gets spread across social media, and it looks pretty horrific at times. In reality, the level of criminality within those incidents is very low. Last year, obviously, we had the documented cases of the damage and the assaults at the restaurants in Broadstairs. And this year, we've had some thefts. We've had a couple of members of staff in one of the shops assaulted, and we've had the incidents on the beach. All of which we want to avoid, all of which we want to prevent. However, in context, it is low-level offending, and it is best done by solving the problem as opposed to cracking the nut, which is what we really want to achieve. And that can only be done from a partnership approach, and that can only be done with a full raft of our toolkit and our abilities to do so. There is mention there about road traffic incidents increasing sharply. So we have a central team that deal with our most serious road traffic crash incidents and the prevention around that as well. And my community safety team will do the road checks, etc., to try and prevent any illegal vehicles, e-scooters, e-bikes, etc., from being on the roads. So lastly, really, the data on page 14, you can see antisocial behaviour has increased and road traffic collisions have increased up there. But again, they were after a fall. It is true to say the visitors to the district have, without a shadow of a doubt, led to an increase of antisocial behaviour. Not responsible for all of it, without a shadow of a doubt, because you see on the right-hand side on page 14, there are many different types of antisocial behaviour, but it's clear to see that a lot of our antisocial behaviour is rowdy or nuisance gathering in public, and that relates to disorder on the beaches, disorder in the parks and in our high streets, which is, again, a symptom of being popular and being visited a lot and increasing that demand. So, in conclusion then, that those three areas, the reducing serious violence, safer people and safer places. On page 15, we have a strategy for tackling it. I'll let you read those in your own time, but in essence, that's working as a partnership, using the police powers, using other agency powers, calling people to account. And what I mean by that is making sure that all agencies play their part, and it's not just left to the key agencies, if you like. That's making sure that everybody works together to try and tackle these issues. There are a couple of pages of conclusions there, but I think I've covered excuse me, most of it within that area. And I think I will submit that. I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, did you want to come back, Penny, or are you done? Okay, members, questions? All hands up everywhere. I'll take Councillor Packman first.
Is that on? Yeah, I'm on. Thank you for that. And it might not be for you can answer all these, but maybe some people around you might be able to. There's been some excellent work and interventions via the CSP, so I want to first off say thank you. There's a couple of incidents in Dane Valley that I know because of the intelligence-led policing and the community safety partnership that has led to some serious arrests, which has prevented further incidents. And going back to your point around taking out the main person and not just dealing with the problem, does really work. So I just want to thank you and your teams and the council around that. But I think you mentioned the word a few times, centralised teams. And I think that's your biggest problem with Kent Police. I know that's way above your pay grade, right? So maybe you might have to feed this back to the Chief Constable. But we do miss localised policing. And I think pretty much every resident will probably back that. You know, you talk about central road traffic team. We used to have local traffic officers. We used to have local bobbies on the beat. And I know it's budget pressures, but I do think we see it in Margate High Street, the PCSOs. They're visible, but they're there for such a short time. It's actually ineffective because they go, crime will happen. So we need that regular visits to the high streets. I know Broadstairs would probably benefit. Birchington, when Quecks have events on, would all benefit. But I know, again, it's all down to resources. But I think that's a key issue. There is, you're there for 15 minutes and you go. It just needs to be a bit more consistent, a bit more regular. You talk about knife crime. Yeah, and you say it's on the rise. Yeah, I've noticed the knife amnesty bins are starting to dwindle down in numbers. So Dane Valley, there was one in Tomlin Drive. I can't see it anymore. I was there a couple of weeks ago. Can't see it anymore. So if we can have a look at where the knife amnesty bins are and make sure they're out and about, that'll be helpful. Sorry, I'm just going down my list. So I'll talk about high streets. And then my final point is around events at Dreamland, at Quecks, and big kind of events that are not on public land. Why do these not have to adhere to the same level of security that maybe a public land event would have to adhere to? So I'll take the Soul Festival, for example. The security measures on there are really good, really tight, and very little incidents happen at the Soul Festival. Yet we see a big event at Dreamland, and yet it's down to the police to police the streets and southeastern trains to police their area. So why is there not the same level of security scrutiny there for the public land? I know they do well in Dreamland and all that, but on the public land, it's down to you guys. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I've got the gist of them, but please do come back at me if I miss anything. So, in terms of the centralisation, so yes, Kent Police has certain centralised teams. So, probably relevant for this forum, our antisocial behaviour centralised team will provide the expert advice and support when taking people to court for a community, a CBO or something like that. But what I think is important for this as well, and it's kind of reassurance for you really, is that we've continued following the government pledge around neighbour policing and town centre policing. We're continuing to uptick actually. So whilst we do have these centralised teams, and I'm completely agree with you that there is no better policing than localised policing, with that knowledge, that understanding, that ability to be flexed and move and exactly know where you are all the time. I 100% agree with you on that. We now have a fairly sizable town team. So we have 9 police officers just for the towns. And what you will see over time is that will only increase as our neighbourhood teams, because we've pledged to increase our neighbourhood teams again. So the 2 neighbourhood task forces that we've got now, Thanet is unique having 2. And that's not to be confused with the CSP multi-agency task force as well. But we now have a really significant neighbourhood team in Thanet, and actually I've been district commander, I'm going into my 4th year, and the neighbourhood team in Thanet is now bigger than at any period during my tenure. So there is a real commitment to going hyper-local. And the Chief Constable is quoted as saying that he wants the town centres to be areas where people are safe and also areas where criminals don't feel welcome. So that is a huge commitment, and we are increasing those numbers around that neighbourhood. So, yeah, I hope that's a reassurance to you. The knife crime bins, I know that we do have them. I don't, Joanna, do you want to?
Is that it? Yeah. We have 17 bins across the district, and we still have all 17 out. If the bins aren't being used that much, then they are moved to different locations. So it could be that the hall wasn't big on those ones. I can send out the figures for the area if that would help, and send out the link on the TDC webpage of where they are.
Okay, and then lastly, talking about the events, the Dreamland events, there's an element of law here, basically. So the huge events that you see, I know, take Wembley, for example, they will have a local agreement and a bylaw put in place that Wembley will be responsible for some of the stewarding, etc. outside. We don't have that here. What we do have is the SAG, the Safety Advisory Group, and we locally will grade all events and all weekends. Funnily enough, it's part of our the tactics we do. We work on a traffic light system in essence. So we go red, amber, green. So we will look at a weekend in Thanet or an event at Dreamland or an event on the beach or whatever it may be, and we will go, okay, this you know, there's lots of people going to come. This could be a red weekend. The weather's going to be super hot. We know it's going to be busy. So we will then plan with our partners, including the Dreamland, for example, hosting it, to make sure that there is sufficient in place. Now, part of Dreamland's licensing agreement is to make sure that they have sufficient in place. But you're right, that is on site. I don't put my police officers in Dreamland. That is a conscious decision on behalf of Kent Police, because A, I'd have to put an awful lot in there if we're going to police it, and B, we'd be in there 5 minutes before we've got something, and suddenly you're taking police officers off the street. It is better to have them on the ground outside dealing with the outside incidents and let Dreamland run their event, and we do keep those two separate. Where the crossover is the entrance and exits. So we will have our knife arches, we will have our drug dogs on the entrances, sweeping people as they come in so that stuff isn't going in there that shouldn't be. And similarly, they will do it on the inside as well. But there's a very defined reason why we do it. It's so that we don't end up getting sucked into Dreamland stuff. And conversely, I don't want, and this is no disrespect to Dreamland, I don't want untrained people dealing with drunk members of the public on the street. I'd rather my professional officers, BTP, Southeastern, who are used to dealing with that sort of stuff, security guards who are licensed to do it, I'd rather have that control. Yes, that creates more of a demand for me, but my primary concern is always the safety of the community, so that's why we do it that way.
Thank you, that's all reassuring, and thank you, Joanna, for that. I just want to finish by saying thank you. I don't think you get thanked enough. You highly criticised all the time by us and the public. But I just want to say thank you to you and the CSP, because there has been some outstanding work in the last sort of 6-7 months, which has got some really horrible people off our streets. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I echo those thoughts. Just pick up on the Dreamland thing. So when they have, I mean, there was a 2-day reggae thing over bank holiday. There was a heavy police presence along the seafront, guys in high visas and vehicles. Is there a contribution from Dreamland towards that extra policing?
Not at present, no. It is something that has been discussed, but at this time, Kent Police pick up the responsibility for all policing on that side of the business.
So they make huge profits, 10,000 people plus over a weekend, and you have to put on extra resources just for them to make to put that event on.
It's not unique. Yes, I mean you could turn to the big football events, for example, but football has its own law. There are laws written for football events, hence why they carry separate rules. Concert music events, which is what this would fall into, wouldn't come into that legislation. And you will find again, if you go to huge concert venues like the O2, for example, the Met Pole would pick up the bill outside the dome.
Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you. So it's about the safer people slide. Because obviously people with learning difficulties are a group that generally has sort of increased vulnerability to crime. But I noticed they weren't specifically mentioned there. Are there any specific things the sort of police are doing to either look after or engage with these people, or is it covered under another item?
Are you talking about any specific demographic in particular, or is it anyone with additional needs? Or
yeah, it was just generally sort of learning difficulties.
Yeah. Well, it depends on where the individual comes from. So, for example, we do an awful lot of work with the schools around exactly that sort of situation. So that the child-centred policing team, who historically you would have known as the schools officers, now work within the community and with schools, and they're really well trained and understand the areas of vulnerability around young people. So that when we're dealing with them on the streets, there's a crossover. So that a lot of the time they'll know the kids involved and they've already dealt with them. In terms of adult vulnerability, again, there are vulnerability panels within the Community Safety Partnership set up where we discuss individuals with additional needs and with acute vulnerability, and we approach those individuals on an individual basis and discuss what we need to do as a partnership to approach that. But holistically, time has really changed in terms of officer training. There is a much greater, broader understanding of vulnerability, of learning difficulties, of additional needs, and the way that can affect behaviour. Officers are very much more in tune with trying to deal with someone sympathetically, even if they're committing offences, etc. And I refer to the way the police deal with 136 now. We will always speak to. We have a phone number. It's called 836, and when every officer who's considering taking someone with acute mental health into custody, we will always phone that number, and 24 hours a day we will speak to a medical expert on the phone who will make the decision in conjunction with the officer as to what we're going to do with the individual. The reason why we're dropping is because that really works, because we're talking to medical experts and they will say, no, don't arrest them, for want of a better term, under 136. I've found them a safe place to go. I've spoken to the hospital, you can take them there, etc., etc. So we're taking a much more grown-up approach to dealing with people with additional needs. There will always be times where, irrespective of the vulnerability of an individual, we have to act fast. And we do arrest people with extreme vulnerability because we have to protect the rest of the community, and often we have to protect them. So there will always be time, and I know there has been some concerns around certain individuals, and I've responded to some councillors individually about concerns around people who've been arrested, but we have to obviously place preservation of life right at the top, and if it means we have to make an arrest, it does. But equally, that then usually accelerates them getting their help anyway. So, what we don't do is bang them up for 24 hours and then say, right, okay, we'll kick you out or charge you or whatever it may be. The help is then coming in as a secondary resource. So we've really made huge strides in this, I think. I've been a police officer for 30 years, and when I was a young officer, this was not spoken about. It was, this is the law, this is what we'll do. Now you will find that virtually every single time we go to an incident, because I spoke about how high mental health is on the agenda, we will consider that in our decision-making processes. It might not affect the outcome, but it will certainly be part of the process. So it's very, very much high up.
Councillor Cowie.
I was just going to say, yeah, thank you for covering that. Cheers.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Ian. I've got a question regarding knife crime. It's the carrying of knives which lead to the knife crime. It seems to be on the rise, and it appears the public would like to see harsher penalties for knife carrying. We see harsh penalties for the knife crime. I wondered what the protocol is for Thanet officers if an individual is stopped and found to be carrying a knife, and basically what actions the officers take, and whether you feel that they are sufficient as far as the law permits.
Yes, thank you. I can answer that quite easily, actually, and it's zero tolerance. Irrespective of the circumstances, we will take the strongest possible immediate action if we find someone carrying a knife, and be that a child or an adult, because it is such, as you say, it is a prevalent issue for society in general, I think. Very, very high-profile cases around the country. We've already seen that violent crime is increasing. We have a knife crime concentration zone now in Margate. If my officers find a knife on someone, they will be arresting them immediately. What happens next is perhaps open for more societal debate in terms of whether the outcome is correct or not. I have very little influence over that, but what I will say to you is that we will place people before courts if they're carrying knives.
Thanks.
Just go back to what you said at the beginning of your presentation about a certain demographic that are involved in this violent crime. Is it fair to say that the victim and perpetrator are always known, or most of the time known to each other?
Pretty much exclusively, yes. Serious violence around with the use of weapons and knife crime is often, it goes into two categories, because a lot of our data around knife crime often isn't knives itself. It sounds strange, but it can be other weapons as well. Weapons are used in domestic abuse, we know that, but in terms of serious violent crime involving weapons and knives on the street, it's individuals living chaotic lifestyles who tend to know each other, and invariably there's an underlying cause to it. And it's really important that we get that message out there, that the chances of being subject to a knife incident or being assaulted to that level as a normal member of the community who's never come across any of this before is very, very low. We are good at solving this because normally both the victim and the perpetrator will know each other, and it's not so much Margate Town Centre is a problem for knife crime, it's just the backdrop where those two individuals happen to be when they're having whatever it is that they're having. So there are some quite high profile cases where we've had knife incidents in areas of Thanet you wouldn't believe. That a few years ago there was a knife incident at Birchington train station, for those who remember. That had nothing to do with Birchington. It was the fact that they travelled on the train, they knew each other, they had their incident, it happened to be at Birchington. So nearly all of our knife crime that happens in public are individuals that know each other, have an issue with each other. Often it's drugs related, but I can't give you any data on that, so I can't pin my colours to the mast on it. But we know that from working with the individuals. But the chances of being a victim of knife crime when you're not in that chaotic world is very low.
Yeah, it's quite saddening that Margate gets this stab central because of what's happening, and it is a case of don't have nightmares, really, isn't it? The proverbial. Councillor Bright.
Thank you. And thank you again for all the work you do. It's brilliant. I am going to talk about violence against women and girls. I don't know why Kent Police separate violence against women and girls figures with the domestic abuse and sexual offences, because in the government VORG strategy, they're the same. It's perpetrators of domestic abuse and sexual offences are predominantly male and the victims are predominantly female. It is violence against women and girls. Why do we separate them? Because I think it's very dangerous in a report to be communicating that it's a good news story that we're bringing down violence against women and girls offences when we've got the highest rates of domestic abuse in Kent, and we've got over 3,000 sexual offences. That's the terrible statistics. They're really, really hard to hear. 5,586 incidents of domestic abuse. That's really hard to hear. So what in the strategy, in the government strategy, it's very kind of focused on prevention, and the prevention is, unfortunately, the burden of responsibility seems to fall very much on teachers and educating young people. But obviously, we know that it's not just teachers; it's everyone's responsibility, and we need experts going into schools. We cannot leave that responsibility with teachers. It simply isn't fair. So, as a community safety partnership, is there anything we can do to improve our communications with schools? And what, I mean, there's a lot of questions in there, sorry. I'm very interested to know why we separate VORG and domestic abuse, first of all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. The simple reason is so that we understand the problem better. So all DA is violence against, I won't say all because there are some elements, but 99% of domestic abuse, as you say, is male on female, and that will be counted in the VORG data as well. So it almost double counted, so it will count as a domestic abuse data and it will count as VORG data. The reason we separate it out is so that we truly understand our domestic abuse data, because there is VORG against individuals that we need to tackle, and we have been tackling as a partnership, that isn't domestic abuse related. So I'll give you an example where there were some female members of staff at a bar on Margate Seafront that were subject to routine harassment and abuse. We became aware of it, but it was from strangers. So that went into our VORG data, but wouldn't have gone into our DA data, because DA is split into intimate and non-intimate DA, as I'm sure you know. Intimate DA is a partner or an ex-partner. Non-intimate DA is normally familial, so it could be brother, sons, etc., etc. But the whole reason we separate it out isn't to try and muddy the waters. It's to try and clarify it so that we understand how much of our VORG is DA. Because if the two figures are really, really high together, we know that all our violence against women and girl issue is DA related. But in Thanet, what we have seen, as I say, we've seen a drop off on VORG, which means that we're dealing with the stuff on the street better, but we are still seeing high DA, which means there's still work to be done. And for us, it's important to see that difference. Please don't take away that we're underplaying the importance around DA. If anything, by splitting it, we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to really see the issue. In terms of the stuff around schools, there is the partnership. I mean, Joanna has sort of and her team lead on this really around the stuff that we do within schools around education. Intrinsically linking knife crime around our ladder of risk stuff with educating young people around around violence, around DA, around violence against women and girls. There's huge amounts going on. I agree with you. It's not a teacher problem. My female half of my family are all teachers in Thanet, so I know what they face, and I agree with you. It's a partnership problem, and it needs to be focused on holistically. It's another night, because I'm sure Joanna could regale you for ages with some of the amazing stuff that her team do. I mean, I chair the CSP executive group, and not kidding, for an hour she can update on the stuff that the CSP, led primarily by her team, have done around this work. So there is tons of stuff going on. I'm sure we'll on a different occasion we'd update you with all the stuff that's being done. But I hope the reason we separate it is to try and see the picture, as opposed to try and ignore it.
Just to say that given the very high sort of incidence of FORG and sexual offences, are we pursuing funding? Is there anything available for us having such high rates in as a district in Kent?
We don't have any additional funding outside of the crime reduction grant, which is allocated by the PCC. So we don't have any extra funds beyond that.
Councillor Green.
Yeah. I'm very conscious of the range of different problems you have to deal with, some of them very serious. But in our consultation in Ramsgate for our Pride in Place funding, lack of security in the town centre was very much the highest problem that our public and our shopkeepers told us about. When we asked them why they feel insecure in the town centre, they said street drinking, the number of times that they witness shoplifting, and out of control and unruly behaviour by children, some of them quite young. Now, you probably know that the town council has employed 2 security staff to try and help with this. And the shopkeepers in particular tell us that it is making a difference. When we ask about the police, they say they're just not there. And when they call them, by the time they get there, it's too late. And I wondered if you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, I fully understand the concerns of Ramsgate. I went to their town council meeting myself, and I've had meetings with the partnership over there many times. Ramsgate town centre remains one. I spoke previously about our hotspots, so it remains one of our hotspot policing areas. That's what that means, is that we target that area for additional resources and patrolling and problem solving. Yes, the security team over there, I provided a statement of support to the town council to employ those, because I fully believe in working with the security teams. It's worked in Margate, it's worked in Broadstairs especially, and it worked in Ramsgate too. So I understand where the businesses are coming from. It is a difficult one, because with the engagement I've had, yes, there are problems, but there's been some real positives in there as well. So there are 2 beat officers for Ramsgate Town Centre. They work really, really hard. Dwayne, who's been there for ages, he's a really good police officer, and he works really, really hard. So it's not sad is too strong a word, but it's a shame that some members of the public feel that the police aren't there all the time, because I know they are there, but of course they can't see everybody all the time. And it's a truism that as soon as we go in and pluck a problem out, we are out the game for a fair part of that shift, the remaining part of that shift. Whereas the security teams can be on site and be visible all the time. But there is, what I would say to that is that, again, you have my 100% commitment, and I know I've spoken to the Ramsgate councillors a lot about this, that it remains one of the key areas. So I say Margate, Cliftonville and that Ramsgate Town Centre are the 3 areas of Thanet that remain the priority for myself and my neighbourhood teams. They are the areas, in terms of antisocial behaviour, in terms of disorder, that we focus on the greatest. We've had some real success stories in there as well. There have been individuals that we've dealt with, but we know that there is an ongoing problem in there. I'm not going to shy away from that. There's a problem with youth-related disorder, and there's a problem with, for want of a better term, street drinkers, vagrancy, and the alcohol stuff that we do. We are tackling that. We are tackling it with our partners, and the commitment is there to go forward, because being part of that, the team as well, that looking at the regeneration of Ramsgate, I'm fully committed to it. And we will keep ploughing in, and we will keep working until we're able to fix it. My goal is that the businesses will turn around and say, yes, you've made a difference. And if they feel that we haven't so far, there's more work to be done. But my commitment's there.
Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, and again, thank you for all the wonderful work you do. I'd like to understand, when there's an ASB spike, as you described, like those that have occurred in Broadstairs, what's the policy on bringing officers from other areas? I mean, many residents feel this should happen, but then, of course, that's going to leave other areas exposed. How do you decide this, please?
Yes, we do that, basically. We do it in a couple of different ways. So the first way is the most sort of advanced way, if you like, and that's the pre-planning. So based upon the crime data, the antisocial behaviour that we see for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we plan for the following year, for the following year, for the following year. So we have quite a significant uplift already plumbed in for key events that are coming up in Broadstairs, in Margate, in Ramsgate. And I spoke earlier about the red, amber, green. We map that across the whole of the district, and we identify key areas where we uplift. Now, we can uplift in lots of different ways. That can be local uplift by changing shift patterns, by adjusting duties, because let's be honest, if I know that there's a major event coming up, Broadstairs fireworks, for example, if I know Broadstairs fireworks is happening, I won't have my PCs doing a Monday morning shift. I'll have them doing that Wednesday night shift in Broadstairs so that they're in the right place at the right time. In addition to that, we use phrases like flex and surge. So when we get surges of demand, we can flex our resources round the county using a threat, harm and risk model. So the county has significant resources and sufficient resources to tackle pretty much anything, because we're a very efficient police force. Getting it to the right place at the right time is the challenge, but we are able to move that quite quickly. And because we're quite sophisticated in our communication strategy around the district, when Broadstairs, for example, went, and it was a little bit of a tinderbox, one day it just went, within an hour I was able to get a lot of resources into Broadstairs very, very quickly. So in essence, we plan for the plannable. There's always the unforeseen. And I know people will turn around and say, well, you should have seen that, you should have seen that. But you can say that forever. There's always something. And we have to base it upon what we know rather than hindsight. So we plan well, but if something comes up that we haven't seen, we have the ability to surge in. And we will only surge in and flex those resources if they're available from the right place. So what we won't do is go, Canterbury City Centre, you're really busy, but we'll have your officers. We don't do that. What we do is move from the right places at the right times.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and I do apologise for being so late. I missed your presentation, so if you've dealt with this, Ian, please tell me. It's picking up on David's point about Ramsgate Town Centre. We have people amongst the street drinker community who we know are banned from the town, and yet we see them in the town every day, and we're constantly reporting that. What should we be doing? Are there things we can do about that? Oh, and I wanted to say as well, your comment about the excellence of your beat officers, yes, they're superb, but obviously they can't be in 17 places at once.
Yes, thank you for that. In order to tackle these repeat offenders, it's a slow burn process, and repeated reporting is 100% the right thing to do. So what you will find, and I know that Dwayne, for example, and Rich Batten, and I've spoken to you about the way we do it, and Jim, etc. So we will start with the lowest level of enforcement that we can, so usually the community protection warning. That is, as it says on the tin, it's just a warning as to behaviour. If they breach that, in essence, it carries very little enforcement ability to itself, but that moves us up to the community protection notice. We can then start taking further action. Now, the speed of the criminal justice system, we're at the mercy of it in some respects. So we will summons people. We won't always arrest them, because we only arrest people if we need to. It's proportionate to do so, because if someone's breached their community protection notice, it will make very little difference for my officer to arrest them, take them to custody, say you've breached it, here is your court date whenever, when we could do that when they're on the street. So that's often what happens. And then when we move from the CPN, we can then go up into the bigger powers, right? So a criminal behaviour order, for example. And there are individuals in Ramsgate who are on that pathway. But what I would say is, as frustrating as it is for counsellors, the community, it's also frustrating for the practitioners, because it's nobody's fault, it's just the weight of the system. So we are moving people through that process, and there are individuals in Ramsgate who are subject to that enhanced level. But my appeal goes to yourself, and I know you do, is to report, and we use that evidence to go forward, because as sad as it is, we will often put individuals before court and they'll go, they're vulnerable, and we'll give them a warning, or we'll give them a small fine, which they can't pay, etc., etc., etc. And it takes an awful lot of evidence and an awful lot of weight in order to get a harsher sentence for an individual for that chaotic style of life, that chaotic lifestyle. And that's not one for me to argue whether that's right or wrong. That's just where we are. So we have to, unfortunately, throw a lot of water at the fire before we can put it out. It's just where we are.
Anybody else? We all done? Ian, thank you very much. It's a tough gig, policing in Thanet. We all appreciate that. Will we be seeing you next year?
Oh, how do I answer this one? Probably not. This probably is my last one. That's all I will say.
Well done. Have a very happy retirement, and we're asked to note Ian's report. Excellent. Thank you. We're going to talk about the PSPO. I'm sure you want to stay and listen to that. Okay, moving on to item number 6, which is the antisocial behaviour alcohol PSPO, and I have got a member of the public. I think I'll let Ms Brown do the report first, and I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel is asked to note and scrutinise the content of this report and make any recommendations to Cabinet in relation to the introduction of a proposed antisocial behaviour and alcohol PSPO. The recommendations that Cabinet are being asked to consider are to give full consideration to the results of statutory consultation, to consider the evidence base for a PSPO, and all of this is set out in the annexes, to agree the PSPO as drafted and attached to the report at Annex 1, and to agree that the PSPO should be implemented with effect from the 1st of July 2026 in the proposed restricted areas as set out in the maps which appear on the proposed order. A public space protection order may be made by the Council if it is satisfied on reasonable grounds that 2 conditions are met. These are that activities being carried out within a public place have had a detrimental effect on the quality of life of those in the locality, or it is likely that they will have such an effect, and that the effect or likely effect of those activities is or is likely to be of a persistent or continuing nature, such as to make the activities unreasonable. Evidence gathered prior to the consultation demonstrates that the statutory criteria in relation to the proposed restricted areas and the proposed restrictions is met, and councillors will see that there was overwhelming support from the consultees in favour of the proposed order. There were 372 consultee responses in all, as well as responses from the Police and Crime Commissioner, the Chief Inspector of Police and the Town and Parish Councils. Of those responses, 96.5% of consultees agreed or strongly agreed that the PSPO should prohibit alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. 93.3% supported the prohibition covering the proposed areas set out in the draft order, and 91.9% indicated support for the proposals for a blanket ban in the high streets of Margate and Ramsgate. 96% of respondents agreed with the requirement to surrender alcohol containers when requested by an authorised officer to do so. And 97.58% of respondents agreed with the proposal to prohibit urinating and defecating in any public place other than in a service public convenience. As indicated, the Chief Inspector of Police, the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Town Councils all supported the order in exactly the form drafted. There were some concerns expressed in relation to the proposed PSPO from consultees, and for the most part, these were to do with the fact that the restricted areas don't extend far enough. And in response to this, officers have agreed to monitor and review the efficacy of the order and look at the areas again as part of a review. For now, however, the evidence base only supports the current areas. Other concerns that were expressed were to do with displacement, not tackling the root cause of the issue, and issues with resource, suggesting that there are not enough officers to enforce. The report responds to each of those concerns. Councillors should note that an option analysis is annexed to the report, which demonstrates that the other enforcement powers that are available to enforcement officers and to the police, and why the PSPO is necessary and proportionate as distinct from these other powers. Councillors should also note that the Equality Impact Assessment has been updated post-consultation, and this demonstrates that careful consideration has been given of the equalities implications arising, together with mitigations considered and proposed. This also demonstrates the necessary consideration of the relevant provisions of the Human Rights Act. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Okay, I'll call on Simon Bell.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Bell, and I am Director of Grass Cliftonville CIC, the not-for-profit community organisation that owns and manages the Oval Bandstand and Lawns in Cliftonville West. I'm speaking tonight regarding both the proposed antisocial behaviour and alcohol PSPO and the renewal of the dog control PSPO, which is due later this year. Since acquiring the freehold of the Oval through a community asset transfer in 2021, Grass has invested significant time, money and volunteer effort in transforming what was once a neglected site into a successful community venue and the only green flag accredited park in Malgate. During that time, we have reported issues including dog fouling, fly tipping, graffiti and antisocial behaviour. However, to our knowledge, Thanet District Council has never undertaken any enforcement action at the Oval under either PSPO. We have spent several years exploring community safety accreditation through Kent Police, partly so that trained and vetted Grass staff could assist in addressing these issues. As part of that process, we have approached the Council regarding the possibility of delegated PSPO enforcement powers. We have since been informed that the Council is not prepared to delegate those powers. What makes this particularly difficult to understand is that the Council intends to delegate enforcement powers to private security contractors employed by Ramsgate Town Council. Grass proposed a model based on the Kent Police Community Safety Accreditation Scheme, under which our staff would be vetted, trained and accredited within a recognised policing framework. We therefore remain unclear why delegation to a community organisation managing its own site is considered unacceptable when delegation to private contractors is to be supported. This leaves us in a rather unusual position. The Oval is privately owned and actively managed. The Council does not undertake enforcement there, and it is unwilling to allow the landowner to undertake enforcement on its behalf. In those circumstances, we are struggling to understand what practical benefit continued inclusion within the PSPO areas provides to either the landowner or park users. If the PSPO powers are not being exercised at the Oval, and if the Council is unwilling to permit the landowner to assist with enforcement, then surely it is reasonable to ask whether inclusion remains justified. We would therefore ask the panel to consider whether privately owned and actively managed community assets such as the Oval should continue to be included within the PSPO area, and if so, what tangible benefit that inclusion is providing. At the very least, we would welcome a clear explanation from the Council as to why the Oval should remain subject to the PSPO area when the Council does not appear willing to enforce it and is unwilling to allow the landowner to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bell. Ms Brown, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. Mr Bell, obviously, I've previously written to you in similar terms, but obviously I'm happy to respond to your question tonight. The matter being considered by the panel today is about the alcohol and antisocial behaviour PSPO, the restrictions are set out in Annex 1 of the report. The dog fouling PSPO is not being considered, and so I don't propose to respond to your question in that regard. In relation to the proposed antisocial behaviour PSPO, please note that there's been no such order in place for the last 2 years, and so there couldn't have been any enforcement within that time period in relation to any such order. But what I would say is that under Section 74 of the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act, as I set out in my email to you, a PSPO can apply to any land to which the public has access as of right by virtue of express or implied permission. And while the Oval Bandstand and Lawns is privately owned, it is an open access community-facing site. Because the public has got implied permission to walk, sit and gather there, it legally qualifies as a public space for enforcement purposes. If a boundary line was drawn around the bandstand lawns but exempt the site itself, there is a risk that an enforcement hole would be created, and this could be problematic in a number of regards. If street drinking or associated antisocial behaviour is banned in the surrounding areas but not on the Oval Bandstand lawns, so permitted sort of 10 feet away, the problem isn't solved and there's a high risk that it simply displaces onto the lawns. So including the site in order protects the venue itself from becoming a magnet for the exact behaviours that the PSPO is seeking to stop. So that's the rationale for including it. And whilst I note what you say in relation to enforcement, please also note that there hasn't been such an order in place for the last 2 years. Thank you.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Bell?
Well, not really. I still haven't got an answer to what is the purpose of being included in it. If that did get displaced onto the lawns, then you're not going to do anything about it. So what is the point?
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, any questions? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, and thank you, Simon, for bringing it up. Just a question on what Simon says around enforcement. We have the security officers on the beach. Do they have the powers to enforce the PSPO?
They're not authorised officers.
Okay.
The police and the community safety team are authorised. And in relation to this PSPO, Penny and Joanna do step in, but that's my understanding.
Happy to come in. So yeah, at the moment they're not authorised, but that is something we can look to, because obviously we don't have anything to authorise them for because we don't have a PSPO.
So can I just make a suggestion? I'm assuming, Simon, you're not suggesting that you become an authorised officer and you start chasing people around to enforce the PSPO. But can I make a suggestion?
Yes, I am.
Oh, you are? Oh yeah. Good luck. But can I make a suggestion that when you do get round to making authorised officers, maybe or as authorised officers, could we engage with the local security firms in the area to make them authorised officers? So if they are performing, door supervisory duties, then maybe they could be an extended authorised officer. I don't know how practical that is. It's just a suggestion.
May I just say, to that point, can I not speak? I'm sorry. It's just in response to
Sorry, do you want me just to come back on that? I mean, just to say that obviously whilst the council's got the technical power to delegate its enforcement powers and authorise external bodies to carry out such enforcement activities, doing so has got the potential to introduce really complex governance issues, legal, operational and potentially safeguarding issues. So it's something that council has to be really give very, very careful consideration to, because the council remains a prosecuting and administrative authority, and so it's not something that can be done without considerable consideration.
Councillor Green.
No, just to say that I fully support it. Goodness me, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? And it will really solve a lot of issues, I know, across the 3 towns. So thank you very much for all the work you've done.
Councillor Austin.
Yes, just to echo that, I know it's been very hard work and there's been a lot of reversals along the way, but thank you very much for all the work you've done, because it's very, very much needed. And I do think perhaps there is a discussion to be had about how we work with community groups and private security and other people in general enforcement roles. And I'm thinking about traffic enforcement, for example. There are all sorts of ways that we might be able to work with people, and I realise it's a complicated field, but it does strike me that we all want the same, which is safe, comfortable, secure places for our residents and our visitors, and there may be ways, if we think outside the box a little, that we could be working more effectively by involving more people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we just to note the report. Okay, and then we'll send it off to Cabinet. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, item number 7. It's the new workspace platform, Microsoft 365. Hannah, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, members. So this report proposes to move the Council from Google Workspace to Microsoft 365. This key decision will be taken to Cabinet on Thursday, the 25th of June. The Council has used Google as its primary productivity suite since 2018. When the contract started, Google was more competitively priced and helped to significantly improve collaboration, efficiency and innovation. The contract with Google is due to end in December 2027, ahead of LGR, and there isn't an option to extend that contract. Although Google has been highly effective for the Council, and it's with regret that we are proposing this in some ways, the pricing structure is now far less competitive. We're also, as I'm sure you're aware, a relative outlier. Most government departments and other councils, including all of the councils in Kent, use Microsoft. This makes collaboration with our partners more of a challenge. On this basis, it is almost certain that the new Unitary Council will choose to work with Microsoft. It's really important to ensure that Thanet staff and councillors aren't disadvantaged ahead of local government reorganisation and allow sufficient time for staff and councillor training ahead of vesting day. Although our primary platform is Google, we do still have reliance on Microsoft Office. That's to integrate with some of our corporate systems and applications. Licences with Microsoft are needed to operate this, and they expire this year, October 2026. They are projected to cost alone £259,000 to replace. This report proposes moving the organisation to Microsoft 365 in its entirety and arranging the contract this financial year. This would avoid us having to pay separately for the Microsoft licences I've just mentioned, and also provides a significant amount of time for onboarding and training ahead of LGR. The overall costs are set out within the report. Councillors should note, however, that the technology industry is experiencing volatility with pricing, so approval will be sought within the existing approved budget. However, if costs increase beyond this at the time that we go through the procurement exercise, a further Cabinet decision would therefore be needed. A change of this scale should not be underestimated and will likely create pretty major disruption for a period of time as we transition to a brand new way of working. If approved, however, the project will be managed through our project management process to ensure this impact is mitigated as far as possible. Our view is that taking time to manage this transition in a programme-structured way now will be less disruptive than waiting until just before a new council starts, at which point the costs will also likely be much higher still. It's for those reasons we propose the switch to Microsoft 365, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Members, any questions? Councillor Patman.
All I say is finally, Christ, using Google Calendar. Oh my God, it's it's horrible. Sorry if anyone works for Google. The only question I do have is the obvious. LGR is happening. It's a lot of money to spend for us to be using it for, looks like 6 months in the timeline. Yeah, I don't really know what question I'm asking, but is it value for money? That's probably what I'm asking. For us to be using it for 6 months, what benefit? I know it's going to be probably the new Unitary are going to be using it, but are we really going to benefit for 6 months for nearly £250,000?
So this doing it this way means we avoid that one-off Microsoft Office cost of $259,000 that's due this year. We don't have that existingly within our approved revenue budget, so we would have to put in a request for more budget to cover that if that is the case. Packaging it into this broader productivity suite license means that then we avoid that cost, and then it also means that we're already covered when it comes to the Google renewal. If we wait it out until the Google contract runs out in December 2027, the chances of being able to secure a competitive contract for a period of 4 or 5 months before a new council starts, it's going to be near to impossible. And also, because the volatility of the pricing, the chances are that the costs will have escalated even further still at that point. So we think it's much the kind of the better value option to go for that now, and kind of co-aligning, having the two platforms working side by side means that there's much, allows for less disruption, hopefully, for staff to be able to kind of familiarise themselves with the new system, to work with you as councillors, because it's going to be a new system for you also, and to manage it in a more structured way. Canterbury City Council, who were the only other council in Kent also using Google, left that platform in 2024. They had to do so following an incident that required them to do that quite quickly. And they have definitely, obviously they're sharing lessons learned with us, and they've said, with hindsight, and obviously if circumstances were different, being able to have a more kind of protracted programme of training and kind of smoothing that transition would have been far more favourable for them, and also ultimately for their customers as well. So.
Anybody else? Okay, so we asked to note the report. I will read this out because it is a key decision. So if there are no specific recommendations coming from the panel, members are asked to note the following recommendation going to Cabinet, which is highlighted in paragraph 3.1, and the associated strategic and financial considerations contained within the report ahead of the Cabinet key decision on Thursday, 25th of June. All members agree? Do we need to have a vote on that, or we could just note the report? Okay, thanks, Charles. Moving on to item number 8, which is delivering the Crisis and Resilience Fund. Ashley, good evening.
Hi, thank you. Overview and Scrutiny Panel is being asked to note the following decisions being sought from Cabinet and to make any recommendations in relation to these matters that considers appropriate regarding the delivery of the Crisis Resilience Fund. The report explains the comprehensive delivery plan for the newly introduced National Crisis Resilience Fund. The report recommends the adoption of the phased hybrid model, we've called option 3 in the report, to manage this fund over its 3-year life cycle from 26 to 29. The CRF is a completely new initiative introduced by central government to replace the Household Support Fund. KCC holds a central county pot and has distributed 20% directly to councils to enhance local welfare. Thanet's direct share for year 1 is 451k, a figure directly comparable to our previous funding rounds of Household Support Fund. We're confident that option 3 represents the most strategic and efficient use of this money. Under the phased hybrid model, the year 1 budget of 451k will be split evenly in its initial stages, allocating 181,000 to our trusted external delivery partners for the first 6 months to keep the fund live immediately. Simultaneously, this gives our home energy team the vital space to recruit the required staff to build the internal infrastructure necessary to pivot entirely to direct council delivery for the remainder of the 3-year cycle. The recommendations to Cabinet are: approve the adoption of the phased hybrid model, option 3, to manage the Crisis Resilience Fund over its 3-year life cycle. Note that by approving option 3, the budget is as follows. For year 1, we allocate 181,000 to our delivery partners, 181,000 to cold busters, 60,000 to CRF community coordination, and 30,000 to administrative costs. Total 452,000. For both years 2 and 3, we anticipate coal busters receiving an allocation of 292,000, CRF community coordination 100,000, and administrative costs of 60,000. Total 452. We also, recommendation also includes delegate authority to the Head of Housing and Planning to make minor amendments to the proposed allocation of funding in consultation with a Cabinet member for Housing, if any questions arise during the delivery phase of the scheme. Thank you. Take any questions.
Thanks, Ashley. Members. Oof. Easy evening. Oh, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ashley. I mean, this looks great. It's really good that we've got this money. It's really good that we're able to focus on the work, for example, of the community energy team who do such great stuff. I think from the Green Group's point of view, we're a little disappointed that it doesn't track low-income families in the way that our budget proposals that we brought forward would have been able to do. £72 million gets lost every year from Thanet residents' pockets in unclaimed benefits. We were hoping that this fund would allow us to do more on that. And so we think there's a missed opportunity there. But other than that, it's looking impressive. I'm sure we'll pick it up again at Cabinet and again later. Thank you.
Can I just come back?
Yeah, of course you can, actually.
Right,
Yeah, sure.
I'm just going to pass over to Lucy, who's obviously the home energy team. Sorry, yeah.
Hiya, yeah. So, Lucy Rivers, Sustainable Energy Projects Lead. Thank you for your support for our home energy team. We do a lot of work, so it's really great to hear that it's kind of coming out. In terms of our support, I think it's really important to acknowledge that we only get 20% of, as district councils get 20%. So KCC have so much work they're doing. And so one of the things that is brilliant about this model is that we're going to refer so easily into those central models. So they won't be using our direct pot, but going to those central models further. So that's where we're looking more holistically as like a in-house delivery. Does that make sense?
Councillor Patman.
Yeah, thanks. Are you linking in with other initiatives such as people like Social Enterprise Kent, Energy Navigation Services? You got, all sorts of stuff around energy at the moment, loads of services around energy. But also, you've also got loads of services around cost of living services as well. So is the council linking this in? Because what I don't want to see, as much as I do want people to make sure they've got all the benefits, all the money they can claim, what I don't want to see is people playing the system and claiming from you, claiming from SEK, claiming from Energy Navigation, claiming them from the cost of living pot, claiming from the CRF. They could be very, very rich if they manage to play the system.
Yeah, that's a big part of it as well. So we have really good relations with SEK and their kind of energy teams, green doctors, we are in constant communication with. So we can kind of feed that. We are kind of like a advice service / referral service. So we have those newsletters that would go out and we can kind of communicate. And yeah, you're completely right. Under the under delivery partner model, it's more easy. It's easier for it to be exploited, whereas if it's all in-house and we're able to manage that a bit more essentially and refer to KCC's direct support as well.
Anybody else? Okay, so the recommendation is there in front of you and we're asked to note the report. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on, item number 9, which is forward plan exempt cabinet reports list. Unless there's something from the plan that the panel wish to consider, then members are asked to note the report. All done. Excellent. That concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 8:35. Thank you. See you all Thursday.